It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my wedding day. The venue was filled with joy, laughter, and well-dressed guests, but in the middle of all this happiness, my in-laws decided to steal the spotlight in the worst way. They had been drinking throughout the event, and I could feel the tension building as people whispered and glanced their way. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, they started yelling at me, drawing everyone's attention. "Now that you're married, it's too late to back out. If you want to be part of this family, you need to prove you can provide," they shouted. My face went pale as they continued, demanding that I give them $1,000 a month, as if I had signed up for some financial agreement when I said, "I do." I was in shock, unable to comprehend how such demands could be made at what should have been a celebration of love. I could barely respond, feeling overwhelmed, when my father stepped in. He took the microphone and with all the grace he could muster said, "Enough is enough. Don't you realize you're embarrassing yourselves?" His words silenced the room, but the damage had already been done. What was supposed to be a beautiful moment was tainted by their selfish demands. Larry and I met through a mutual friend who, seeing how I had been single for a while, thought we would make a great match. At first, I wasn't convinced. He asked me out several times, but I just didn't feel that spark. Still, there was something about his patience, kindness, and the way he genuinely cared about me that eventually broke down the walls I had built around myself. After dating for a year, Larry proposed. It wasn't some grand, flashy proposal, but it was sincere and it touched my heart. I said yes, and the thought of spending my life with him started to feel right. When I told my father about the engagement, his reaction surprised me. He was so overcome with emotion that tears filled his eyes. "Linda, you're finally getting married. I couldn't be happier for you," he said, his voice cracking with joy. I teased him, saying, "Dad, you're being so dramatic," but inside I was moved to see how much this moment meant to him. My father had raised me alone after my mother passed away when I was young. He worked hard to give me everything I needed, and now, seeing me start this new chapter in life, his pride was clear. I always thought my father didn't worry too much about me not getting married, but that day he admitted, "I was always concerned you might stay single." I'm so relieved now. It was a heartwarming moment between us, and I could feel the weight of his love and support in every word. After Larry proposed, the next step was meeting his parents. He had already met my father, and it had gone smoothly. Now it was my turn to visit Larry's family. The visit had been delayed for weeks due to conflicting schedules, but we finally managed to plan a day. As we approached his parents' house, my nerves started to get the best of me. "Don't worry," Larry said, sensing my unease. "My parents are really nice." His words gave me some comfort, but as soon as we rang the doorbell and his mother opened the door, I could tell something was off. She greeted Larry warmly, but when she turned to me, her smile faded. "So, you're Linda," she said, her tone colder than I had expected. We entered the living room, and the tension didn't ease. Larry's mother wasted no time getting to the point. "Linda, I'm curious. What exactly do you bring to this marriage?" "Larry is our only son, and we expect his wife to be worthy of him," she said. It felt less like a conversation and more like an interrogation. I was stunned. I hadn't anticipated this hostility. "Are you ready to join our family?" she pressed, her voice growing sharper with every question. I struggled to respond, my mind racing for the right words, but before I could answer, she scolded me for taking too long. Feeling completely overwhelmed, I managed to say, "I believe Larry and I will support each other in our marriage." Her response, a scoff. "You don't get it, do you? Your job is to support him, not the other way around," she snapped. Larry's father tried to smooth things over, apologizing for her harsh words, but the damage had been done. This was my introduction to my future in-laws, and it was far from what I had hoped for. As I sat there, trying to process my future mother-in-law's sharp words, things only got worse. Just when I thought the tension might ease, Larry's brother entered the room. At first, his calm and quiet demeanor gave me hope that at least one member of the family might be kinder, but that hope quickly vanished. With a smile on his face, he said something I couldn't have prepared for. "What concerns me the most, Linda, is that you were raised by a single parent. That's not exactly a good image, is it?" I stared at him in disbelief. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice shaky but firm. His response was as hurtful as the question. Well, it just doesn't look good. We can't exactly celebrate our only brother marrying someone who grew up without a mother. It raises concerns about whether you've learned how to be a proper wife. I was stunned. For a moment, I was too shocked to speak. But then something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let anyone insult my father or my upbringing. I was raised by a wonderful father who worked hard to give me everything I needed. Being from a single-parent family doesn't make me any less worthy, I said, holding back the tears. Instead of backing down, Larry's mother chimed in again. Well, if you want to marry Larry, you need to prove yourself. After the wedding, you must devote everything to us, his family. Can you do that? I was speechless. They expected me to give up everything for them, to prove myself like I was auditioning for a role. I was starting to realize just how twisted this family dynamic was, and yet it wasn't over. The worst was yet to come. The day of the wedding arrived, and despite the tension with Larry's family, I was determined to make it a special day. I walked down the aisle with my father, and as Larry and I exchanged vows, I felt a rush of happiness that almost made me forget about the drama with his parents. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. But that moment didn't last long. At the reception, as we mingled with guests, I started to feel uneasy again. Larry's parents had been drinking heavily, and it was obvious. Their faces were red, and they were swaying on their feet. Just as I was trying to keep things together, his mother snatched my hand and pulled me close. Listen, Linda, she said loudly, drawing the attention of everyone around us. From now on, you will devote yourself to us. Prepare yourself for the test we're going to put you through. Guests around us began to whisper, some even laughing nervously, thinking it was a joke. But this was no joke. Then, Larry's father grabbed the microphone. Linda, don't you feel embarrassed in that dress? It doesn't suit you at all. His words echoed through the hall, and the light-hearted whispers turned into uncomfortable murmurs. I glanced at Larry, hoping he would step in, say something, anything, to stop his parents. But he just stood there, unfazed. They're not doing anything wrong, he said quietly when I pleaded with him. That was the moment I realized Larry would never protect me from his parents. He had no intention of standing up for me, not now and likely not ever. The rest of the reception spiraled out of control. Larry's parents continued their drunken insults, even going so far as to demand I prove my financial worth to them, asking for money as if our marriage was some sort of business transaction. It was humiliating, and in that moment I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. As Larry's parents continued their drunken tirade, I felt my anger rising. They had crossed every possible line, turning what should have been a joyful celebration into a spectacle of insults and demands. I stood there, my face pale, unsure of what to do next. The room buzzed with whispers as guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one stepped in to stop the madness. That's when my father had enough. He grabbed the microphone from Larry's father, his voice calm but firm. Enough of this nonsense, he said, his eyes locked on my in-laws. Don't you realize you're making a mockery of this day? You've embarrassed yourselves long enough. Larry's parents glared at my father, but he didn't back down. He kept his composure, defending me in a way Larry never had. You've insulted my daughter, and you've insulted me, he said, his voice steady. Being raised by a single parent does not make someone less worthy, and you have no right to speak as if it does. The room fell silent as my father continued. He revealed that he had a connection with Larry's father's boss, President Scott, a highly respected figure at Larry's father's company. Funny thing, my father added, President Scott was also raised by a single parent. I wonder how he'd feel knowing you've spoken like this. In an instant, Larry's parents' smug expressions vanished. Larry's father's face turned pale, and he quickly dropped to his knees, begging my father not to tell the president about their behavior. It was a pathetic sight, seeing the man who had insulted me moments ago now groveling for mercy. With my father's support, I felt a surge of strength. I took the microphone from Larry, looked directly at him and said, "There will be no marriage." I announced to the entire room that I would not be marrying Larry, and that I would return any money given for the occasion. Then, with my father by my side, I walked out, leaving behind the chaos and the toxic family that had tried to control me. After I walked out of the wedding, the chaos I left behind only grew. Larry's family, who had been so quick to insult and demand, now faced the consequences of their actions. Word spread quickly, especially among the guests who had witnessed the meltdown. Some even recorded the entire scene on their phones, and it wasn't long before the story of what happened reached Larry's workplace. Larry's coworkers were appalled by his parents' behavior. They couldn't believe he had stood by while they humiliated me at our wedding. His reputation at work quickly took a hit. People began to question his character, wondering how someone could allow their family to act so outrageously and not say a word in defense of their partner. The shame was too much for Larry, and he eventually resigned from his position, unable to face the mounting criticism. But that was only the beginning. When President Scott, Larry's father's boss, found out about the incident, things took a sharp turn for the worse. Larry's father, who had built a career at the company, was demoted and transferred to a remote office in the countryside. His once proud standing at work crumbled in an instant, all because of his actions at the wedding. The family, once so confident in their superiority, was now ostracized by their own relatives. No one wanted to associate with them after what had happened. Their behavior had been too extreme, and the consequences were swift and unforgiving. As for Larry, he lost more than just his job. His family's reputation was ruined, and he became known for being weak, someone who couldn't even stand up for his own fiancé. The relationship he had with his family fractured as the weight of their actions bore down on them. It was a hard fall for Larry and his parents, but it was a result of their own doing. Sometimes when people push too far, they end up destroying themselves. After walking away from the chaos of the wedding, I felt a deep sense of relief. I had escaped a toxic situation before it could trap me for life. What was supposed to be the start of a new chapter in my marriage became the beginning of something entirely different, something better. In the days that followed, I grew closer to my father. He had always been my rock, raising me on his own and working tirelessly to provide for me. Now, with the wedding fiasco behind us, we started spending more time together. One day, while sitting in his office, he asked me a question I hadn't expected. "Linda, have you ever thought about running the family business?" I was caught off guard. Running the company had never been on my mind, especially not after everything that had just happened. "You really think I'm ready for something like that?" I asked, unsure of myself. My father looked at me with a serious expression. "Of course. You're smart, hardworking, and you've got the strength to handle anything. Why not work towards becoming president one day?" The idea was both exciting and daunting. I had always admired my father's leadership, and the thought of following in his footsteps felt like an opportunity to make something of myself. I agreed to give it a try, and from that moment, my focus shifted entirely to the business. I was determined to learn everything I could and prove to both my father and myself that I was capable of leading. The more I immersed myself in the business, the more I realized how fulfilling it was. I didn't need to be weighed down by a toxic marriage or in-laws who didn't value me. I had my own path, and it was one I could control. Reflecting on the wedding disaster, I knew I had made the right decision. Escaping that situation had opened up a future where I could focus on my career, my family, and my own happiness. It's funny how life can take unexpected turns, but sometimes those twists lead you exactly where you're supposed to be. I'm grateful for the strength to stand up for myself and the support of my father, who has always been there for me. Now I'm ready to take on whatever challenges lie ahead and make the most of this new beginning.